I will just say that what happened in the waning days of the Afghanistan operation and the Biden administration's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, I think is now well documented. The fact that there was no vetting that was properly done, there were no interviews that were conducted that were standard, the normal background checks were waived. I mean, heck, as I think we'll see today in just a little bit when we hear from our witnesses, from the inspectors general and others, the standard vetting procedures that have been in place for operations like this were completely disregarded. And we're living now with the consequences of that. Tens of thousands of people admitted into this country. We have no idea of their actual background. We have no idea of their potential terrorist connections. And in many cases, we now have no idea where they are or what they're doing, who they're connected with, or what they're capable of. Sadly, we've seen what some of them are capable of in the horrific shootings that occurred here in the nation's capital just a short while ago with the guardsmen that Senator Cornyn recognized and mentioned. But I think we're going to hear more to even that, this story today. And here is the additional information, the shocking information that I think that we will find. That this Congress, which appropriated $1.5 billion for this operation on the part of then President Biden, the admittance of all of these refugees and parolees, their supposed supervision, $1.5 billion of that money, tens of millions of dollars went to pro-terrorist organizations in this country that were supposed to help monitor these refugees and move them along the parole system, but in fact took the money and did who knows what with it. This is a story that we have seen unfold before our very eyes in Minnesota as we sit here today, and now we're going to find that it happened in this case, in this instances, in multiple states, tens of millions of taxpayer dollars going to organizations that support Hamas, that support terrorism, that have praised the attacks of October the 7th, that have consistently defended, apologized for, and justified terrorist attacks around the nation, around the world, that got money from our own government in order to participate in this boondoggle. And I think we need an accounting of where that money has gone to. I think we need an accounting of how it has been spent. And I think, frankly, we need to get it back. And I hope that today's hearing will begin to shed light on what has happened, the corruption that is still going on, the tens of millions or more of taxpayer dollars that have been misspent, misappropriated, misallocated, and misused. And I would just say I think it's long past time for some accountability. I hope we'll take a step forward in that today. Mr. Adelman, if I could just start with you. You are the Deputy Inspector General for the agency charged with overseeing the Afghan Parolee program. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In 2022, your office found that President Biden's DHS allowed some Afghans into the country before they were fully vetted, including, if I remember correctly, one who had been liberated from prison by the Taliban. Do I have that correct?
That's correct.
I think we're going to see this exhibit maybe over the side of my shoulder here. I just want to read directly from your report. CBP allowed some evacuees to enter into the United States who were not fully vetted. CBP paroled one evacuee into the United States who had been liberated from prison by the Taliban. CBP paroled another evacuee who posed national security concerns. Now, early reports by the inspectors general at DOD and the FBI found that over 50 known or suspected terrorists had entered the United States as a result of the Biden administration's screening or lack thereof. And last month, the director of national intelligence said that 2,000 Afghans in America may have ties to terrorism. That is a very, very big number. So I just want to talk a little bit about how this happened and see if I can get your help in doing that. Let me just start with testimony that this committee, the full committee, the Judiciary Committee, previously received. In 2021, then DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas testified that the administration had a rigorous vetting process in place. I think we've got a quote of his here. We have taken steps, I'm quoting him now, to make sure that the vetting program is indeed rigorous. Now, he said, this may have been in response to a question from me, he said that indeed the vetting did deviate from normal refugee screening. That was an understatement. But he went on to say, we have taken steps to make sure the program is indeed rigorous. So you investigated the vetting process. Did you find that the Biden administration's DHS had a formal vetting process in place that they followed carefully?
Mr. Chairman, before you answer, question for the chairman, are we intentionally bypassing opening statements by the witnesses and going straight to questions?
No, we'll come back to opening statements after Senator Hawley's through.
The department did not have a formal process at the start of the OAW.
Okay, can you just say that one more time?
The department at least could not provide us with a formal screening and vetting process at the start of the OAW process.
The department did not have a formal screening and vetting process in place. The most that the Biden administration did, according to your investigation, was to run Afghans' biometric and biographical information, I think is what you found, like their names and dates of birth and other biographical information they may have supplied. Is that correct? Or that broadly correct?
That's correct until December of 2021 when they began requiring in-person interviews.
So until that time, for the first several months, they were relying on biographical information supplied by the Afghans as well as some biometrics. Now, your office found that that approach was severely flawed, partly because many Afghans did not know their birth dates. Is that correct? Explain this.
That's correct. There was missing information from the OAW population, including first, last names, and date of birth. There was about 11 to 12,000 that did not know their date of birth.
How many, sorry?
Between 11 and 12,000.
11 and 12,000 who did not, which is a cultural thing, I think, but
Correct.
Obviously presents an issue for us when doing vetting. So 11 or 12,000 who were admitted for whom we didn't even have their date of birth. That's pretty extraordinary. Let me ask you this. Did the Biden administration require Afghans to show identification at ports of entry?
The department requested identification, but not all Afghans had formal identification, such as a passport. We found over 30,000 that did not have formal identification.
Can you just say that number one more time? How many who didn't have identification?
I believe the number's actually 36,000.
36,000 who could not show identification at a port of entry. Here's a quote from the report. CBP's concepts of operations allowed its officers to admit or parole evacuees into the country without presenting proper identification documents. 36,000 of them. That's astounding. And then my understanding is to do the bare bones background checks that were actually performed, DHS, the Biden DHS, sent a list of Afghans to the Department of Defense and the FBI. That process would normally take months. Would it surprise you to hear that the DOJ's Inspector General found that the list of evacuees was submitted to the FBI via email and the FBI was given 2 hours to respond?
I can't confirm that. I can just say that there's very limited time to conduct the screening and vetting of those evacuees.
Yeah, here's the quote. It's over my shoulder, I think. DOD and CBP created lists of Afghan refugees which were submitted to the FBI via email with only 2 hours to respond. Let me just ask you finally, I know my time is about expired, just when it comes to interviews, normally refugees, SIV applicants are required to attend an in-person interview. Mr. Edelman, did DHS systematically interview evacuees before they were admitted? Were all the evacuees interviewed?
No,
Did they systematically conduct mental health screenings?
not that I'm aware of.
Well, all of the above should have been done. And the fact that tens of thousands were admitted without so much as an ID, without a birth date, I think it's really no surprise why we are where we are. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Marzouk, if I could just start with you. I want to start with something that you said a moment ago in your opening statement and that you also write about in your written testimony, because it's quite striking. You said that millions of dollars went to an organization, millions of taxpayer dollars went to an organization with terrorist ties, supposedly to help screen parolees to make sure they didn't have terrorist ties. So let's just talk a little bit about how this happened. In the fall of 2021, Congress passed and President Biden signed legislation providing about $1.7 billion in taxpayer funding to help settle for carrying out refugee and entrant assistance activities. That's the language from the statute. And much of that money was then made available to states. Have I got that right?
That's correct.
So we're talking about $1.7 billion originally, tens of millions, hundreds of millions that are available to states that then turn around and give it to grants in the form of grants to nonprofits. Have I got that right?
Exactly.
Now, where this nonprofit money goes is where the story gets interesting. These nonprofit groups are supposed to be helping with the settlement process. Some of them provided legal services to the refugees. Is that correct?
Yes, there was money for resettlement and separate money for legal services.
Got it. So how is it that money, taxpayer money, ends up in the hands of an organization, maybe multiple organizations that have terrorist affiliations? Tell us how this happened.
Well, I think there's plenty of fault to go around. The first should lie with the terrorist-supporting nonprofit that presents itself as a legitimate civil rights organization.
And what would that be?
That's the Council of American Islamic Relations, CARE.
So this is a group that you say has ties to terrorism. Explain why that is.
It's not my opinion. They were an unindicted co-conspirator in the 2008 Holy Land Foundation. And in that trial, the wiretap from the 1993 meeting in which CARE was founded was brought into the federal public record. In that meeting, they specifically state that they are going to present themselves as a legitimate civil rights organization while furthering the mission of Hamas.
So you have an American court proceeding that finds that this entity has direct ties to Hamas, may be part of a Hamas funding network, but yet they're getting money. How much money did they get from the federal government to shepherd Afghan parolees?
It's very hard to track the funding because some state fiscal oversight portals show it more clearly than others. I can say with certainty that in California, they received $15 million. In the state of Washington, they received more than $1 million. And I can say also that an affiliate of CARE, which is called ICNA, the Islamic Center for North America, which has its own documented ties to extremism and terrorism, was also subgranted $1 million.
$15 million in one state, millions in other states going to this entity. Did you say that following October 7th, the leaders of CARE celebrated the Hamas attacks, or did they condemn it? Which was it?
Multiple leaders are on public record celebrating the Hamas attacks. The National Executive Director, the CEO of CARE California, and the Executive Director of San Francisco CARE all publicly celebrated October 7th.
So you've got an organization that was founded in conjunction with Hamas that a federal court has found is linked to the funding network that is somehow getting millions and millions of taxpayer dollars to help Afghan parolees, supposedly to make sure that they're not associated with terrorism. This group's associated with terrorism. Now, when I look at the federal databases to see if there's any reference to CARE, I don't see anything. Why is that? How have they hid the fact they've gotten so much money?
That's correct, Senator, because the money went from Health and Human Services to the states and from the states to nonprofits. In fact, nonprofits could then subgrant further. So the money did not go directly from the federal government to CARE, but rather an intermediary, and that is how they've hidden the money.
It's like a dark money network. Tell me this. Is there any reason to believe that any of the representations that CARE made to the states were false, or did they use false names? Did they use false front organizations? I mean, what do we know?
Absolutely. So in California, the contract between CARE and the state of California for $7.2 million is in the name of CARE of Greater Los Angeles. CARE of Greater LA is not a legal entity. It does not have a federal EIN. It does not file a 990. CARE of California is a legal entity. But since CARE of Greater Los Angeles isn't an entity, there is no way to track that $7.2 million.
There's the cash out. So in other words, because the money was given to a non-legal entity, we can't follow it. Now, I thought you said just a moment ago in your testimony that fewer than half of the Afghans that CARE said they would help have actually been provided assistance, or that is fewer than half of the number they submitted. So where's the rest of the money gone?
Well, in California, CARE is involved in an all-of-society political activism approach. They have paid activists in city councils, in school boards, lobbied in the state legislature to further their extremist agenda. I cannot say with certainty that that's where the federal dollars went, but I can say that on the ground, we see the political radicalization from CARE in every aspect of California civic life.
Were they involved in any way in anti-Israel, anti-Jewish protests after October 7th that we saw all over the country?
Absolutely. CARE's leadership was present at the universities of California and the Cal State campuses, and in fact, gave sermons and speeches on those campuses.
So for all we know, the money could have gone there. I mean, my point is, and thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, we need to find out where this money has gone. This is a scandal. This is corruption. And we've got to figure out how taxpayer money has ended up in the hands of yet another organization with terrorist ties. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.